In this video, I'm going to tell you a story about a man you have probably never heard of, but you most certainly have heard about his family and the company they lead. This man is responsible for many crimes that most never knew. He's one of the richest men in Germany, and his family continue to prosper off his fortune as they try to ignore the blood that fortune was founded on. Perhaps even you, the viewer, have enjoyed a product that this man and his family have produced. I'm going to tell you the story of Gunther Quandt and his sons, the owners of BMW. Gunther Quandt was born in 1881 to a family that owned a textile company. In 1914, the First World War broke out. The war led to millions of people losing their homes, their families, and their lives. The world was broken, but for Gunther, the war was profitable. The now 33-year-old Gunther used his family's textile company to produce uniforms for the German army. This endeavor allowed his family to earn a large fortune. Gunther learned that war was an opportunity, and if Gunther ever saw another war on the scale of World War I, he would be sure to capitalize on it. However, the war was not all good for Gunther. In 1913, Gunther had married a woman named Antony Ewald. The couple had two sons, Helmut and Herbert Quandt. In 1918, Gunther would experience tragedy with the loss of his wife, Antony. She contracted the Spanish flu and died shortly afterwards. While Gunther and his two sons were surely heartbroken, it did not take long for Gunther to find love again. 3 years after the death of his first wife, Gunther would marry again. The now 40-year-old Gunther was married to a woman that was half his age, to 19-year-old Johanna Maria Magdalena Ritschl, and I apologize if I horribly pronounced the name. Gunther and Magda, as she would be called, had one biological son, Harold. Gunther and Magda would share 6 children together: Herbert, Helmut, Harold, and 3 children of deceased friends. A few years later, Gunther would experience another tragedy when in 1927, Gunther's 19-year-old son Helmut would suddenly die from complications with appendicitis. Following this, Gunther and Magda's relationship would sour. Gunther became obsessed with expanding his industrial empire and left Magda to raise 5 children. Gunther soon learned that Magda was having an affair and filed for divorce. During the interwar period, Gunther used his fortune to invest into other companies. He would buy a battery manufacturing company called AFA, a mining company, and several metalworking companies. Gunther was becoming fabulously wealthy, but while his fortune was growing, Germany was in shambles. The nation had just lost World War I, and the Great Depression was making matters even worse. The democratic government that had been installed after the war, the Weimar Republic, was incapable of handling the many issues that arose from the Great Depression and the Treaty of Versailles. This crisis plunged the country into a severe economic crash, high unemployment, and social unrest. This led to extremists like Adolf Hitler gaining popularity. Hitler, with his popularity on the rise, decided to try and build relationships with the leading German industrialists of the time. He invited Gunther Quandt to a meeting. The right-wing conservative may have been interested in Hitler's ideas, but was not impressed with Hitler himself. He described him as, quote, thoroughly average. However, while Gunther kept his distance from the Nazis, his ex-wife Magda did the opposite. She fell in love with Josef Goebbels. Goebbels was the Reich leader of Nazi Party propaganda, and he was a true believer in Hitler's cause. Goebbels was so close to Hitler that when Goebbels married Magda, Hitler was Goebbels' best man. As for Magda, Hitler loved her. She would later be known as the First Lady of Nazi Germany. Her and Goebbels would have 6 children together, and would also raise Gunther Quandt's son, Harold. Knowing Gunther's family connection to the Nazis, it should come as no surprise that when Hitler finally obtained power in 1933, Gunther quickly joined the Nazi Party. While Gunther benefited from his alliance with the Nazis, his decision to join the party would lead to blood and suffering across Europe. Hitler immediately recognized the significance of Gunther's admission to the Nazi Party. Gunther was incredibly wealthy, and he owned many industrial factories that could prove useful in his goal of rebuilding the German army, the Wehrmacht. He appointed Gunther to the position of leader of the armament economy. In this position, Gunther would turn his industrial empire towards mass-producing German armaments as they readied for war. Gunther's factories would prove to be invaluable to Hitler's armies. He provided them with ammunition, rifles, artillery, and batteries. Gunther's batteries would be the most significant contribution to the German army. His batteries made German submarine warfare and the V-2 rocket program a possibility. And as Hitler's appetite for conquest grew, so did Gunther's pockets. As Germany began to enact the Holocaust, Gunther saw his opportunity to grow his empire. Gunther quickly jumped at the chance to seize Jewish industrial companies as the owners were hauled away to concentration camps by the Gestapo. In one case, Gunther attempted to take over a chemical company in Belgium by claiming that the owner was Jewish, which he was not. He went so far as to file a formal inquiry to the local Nazi government to determine whether or not the man was Jewish. Gunther also indulged in the Nazi slavery. When Germany conquered mainland Europe, they created a mass system of slaughter and enslavement of anyone they considered undesirable. They began shipping millions of abducted people across Europe to work in their factories. Estimates vary, but somewhere between 10 to 15 million people found themselves enslaved by the Nazis. Gunther saw opportunity in this terrible crime. 3 of his factories, located in Berlin, Hanover, and Vienna, began using thousands of slaves to produce their products. Gunther's own son, Herbert, oversaw the Berlin factory, which housed female slaves to produce their batteries. Herbert's factories was a death sentence for Jewish slaves. Herbert forced them to build batteries without any protective gear. Jewish women would be forced to work in air highly polluted with acid as they slowly died. His factories were so deadly that he would request a concentration camp be built on the site of the factory, so he could easily replace the workers who perished. Herbert's factories would kill 40 to 80 people a month. While Herbert oversaw this mass killing, Gunther was pleased at the profits his factories were making. To encourage slaves to work harder, Gunther and Herbert constructed an execution area in one of their factories, where they would hang slaves who fell behind in work. By the end of the war, over 50,000 people would be forced to work for Gunther and his son as they built weapons that would kill and enslave more people. When the war finally came to a close, many Nazis were facing a dire situation as justice approached. Gunther's ex-wife, and now wife to Josef Goebbels, Magda, would do the unthinkable. Goebbels and Magda decided that theirs and their children's lives belonged to Adolf Hitler. In the final days of the war, while hiding in Hitler's bunker, Magda and Goebbels awoke their children in the middle of the night and murdered all of them. The children were aged between 12 and 4. Goebbels and Magda then committed suicide. Gunther's son that he shared with Magda was, by this time, 23 years old and was a lieutenant in the German Luftwaffe. He was captured by the Allied forces in Italy in 1944 and was a prisoner of war when his mother committed suicide and murdered his siblings. While he was sitting in prison, he received a letter from his mother. His mother had been preparing to end the lives of her children when she wrote, quote,
Harald, my beloved son, by now we have been in the Führerbunker for 6 days already. Daddy, your 6 little siblings and I, for the sake of giving our national socialistic lives the only possible honorable end. You shall know that I stayed here against Daddy's will, and that even on last Sunday the Führer wanted to help me to get out. You know your mother, we have the same blood. For me there was no wavering. Our glorious idea is ruined, and with it everything beautiful and marvelous that I have known in my life. The world that comes after the Führer and National Socialism is not any longer worth living in, and therefore I took the children with me, for they are too good for the life that would follow. And a merciful God will understand me when I will give them the salvation. The children are wonderful. There never is a word of complaint, nor crying. The impacts are shaking the bunker. The elder kids cover the younger ones. Their presence is a blessing, and they are making the Führer smile once in a while. May God help that I have the strength to perform the last and hardest. We only have one goal left, loyalty to the Führer even in death. Harald, my dear son, I want to give you what I learned in life. Be loyal. Loyal to yourself, loyal to the people, and loyal to your country. Be proud of us and try to keep us in dear memory.
What about Herbert and Gunther Quandt? The war was now over, and this father-son duo was responsible for the deaths of thousands of slaves and the production of German weapons. Gunther was arrested in 1946 because of his connection to Josef Goebbels. Unfortunately, the concentration camp and its enslaved prisoners were not known at the time. With little evidence against him, Gunther was released with no charges against him. Gunther continued to run his industrial empire after the war. Gunther would die while on vacation in Egypt in 1954. He died a free and wealthy man. As for his son Herbert, despite him being responsible for personally leading a company that used Jewish slave labor and worked them to death, he never faced a trial for his crimes. In fact, he took over the leadership role of his father's empire after his father died. Him and his brother Harold would continue to make a fortune. Herbert would most notably go on to buy a controlling stake in BMW in 1959. Herbert saved BMW and made the company the success we know today. Herbert would die in 1982 and never face justice for his crimes. Today, Gunther's grandchildren and Herbert's children continue to lead BMW and their other industrial companies. They are one of the richest families in the world, with Herbert's daughter Suzanne being the richest woman in Germany with a net worth of almost 26 billion US dollars. Next time you see a BMW, think of the blood and tears that paid for that car's success.